Once a group of beggars afflicted with leprosy came to the assembly of Zen master, Bankai, a great-hearted teacher of the masses. Bankai admitted them to his company, and when he initiated them, he even washed and shaved their heads with his own hands. Now as it happened, there was a certain gentleman present, the representative of a baron, who had faith in Bankai and had already built a temple in his province where the teacher could train disciples and lecture to the people. Revolted by the sight of the Zen master shaving the heads of untouchables, the gentleman hurriedly brought a basin of water for Bankai to wash his hands. But the master refused, remarking, "Your disgust is filthier than their source." Once upon a time there was a stone cutter. Each day he went up to the mountains to cut stones. And while he worked he sang, for though he was a poor man, he desired no more than he had, so he had not a care in the world. One day he was called to work on the mansion of a nobleman. When he saw the magnificence of the mansion, he experienced the pain of desire for the first time in his life, and he said with a sigh, "If only I were rich. Then I would not have to earn my living in sweat and toil as I do now." Imagine his astonishment when he heard a voice say, "Your wish has been granted. Henceforth, anything you desire will be given to you." He did not know what to make of the words till he returned to his hut that evening and found in its place a mansion as magnificent as the one he had been working on. So the stone cutter gave up cutting stones and began to enjoy the life of the rich. One day when the afternoon was hot and humid, he happened to look out his window and saw the king go by with a large retinue of noblemen and slaves. He thought, "How I wish I were a king myself, sitting in the cool of the royal carriage." His wish was promptly carried out and he found himself reclining in the comfort of the royal carriage. But the carriage turned out to be warmer than he had assumed it to be. He looked out of the carriage window and began to marvel at the power of the sun, whose heat could penetrate even the thick walls of the carriage. "I wish I were the sun," he said to himself. Once again his wish was granted and he found himself sending out waves of light and heat into the universe. All went well for a while. Then on a rainy day, he attempted to pierce through a thick bank of clouds and could not. So he got himself changed into a cloud and glorified in his power to keep the sun away, till he turned into rain and found, to his annoyance, a mighty rock that blocked his path, so he was obliged to flow around it. What, he cried, "A mere rock more powerful than I? Well, then, I wish to be a rock." So there he was standing tall upon a mountainside. He barely had time to rejoice in his fine figure, however, when he heard strange clipping sounds proceeding from his feet. He looked down and, to his dismay, found a tiny human being sitting there engaged in cutting chunks of stone from his feet. "What," he shouted, "a puny creature like that more powerful than an imposing rock like me? I want to be a man." So he found he was once again a stone cutter going up into the mountain to cut stone, earning his living in sweat and toil, but with a song in his heart because he was content to be what he was and to live by what he had. A martial artist knelt before his master sensei in a ceremony to receive the hard-earned black belt. After years of relentless training, the student has finally reached a pinnacle of achievement in the discipline. Before granting you the belt, you must pass one more test, the sensei solemnly tells the young man. "I'm ready," responds the student, expecting perhaps one more round of sparring. "You must answer the essential question. What is the true meaning of the black belt?" "Why, the end of my journey," says the student. "A well-deserved reward for all of my hard work." The master waits for more. Clearly, he is not satisfied. The sensei finally speaks. "You are not ready for the black belt. Return in 1 year." As the student kneels before his master a year later, he is again asked the question, "What is the true meaning of the black belt, a symbol of distinction and the highest achievement in our art?" The young man responds. Again the master waits for more. Still unsatisfied, he says once more, "You are not ready for the black belt. Return in 1 year." A year later the student kneels before his sensei and here's the question, "What is the true meaning of the black belt?" This time he answers, "The black belt represents not the end, but the beginning, the start of a never-ending journey of discipline, work and the pursuit of an ever higher standard. Yes, says the master. You are now ready to receive the black belt and begin your work. Thank God we took a horse with us on the picnic, because when one of the boys was injured, we used the horse to carry him back. How did he get injured? The horse kicked him. A martial arts student approached his teacher with a question. I'd like to improve my knowledge of the martial arts. In addition to learning from you, I'd like to study with another teacher in order to learn another style. What do you think of this idea? The hunter who chases two rabbits, and so the master catches neither one. 4 monks decided to meditate silently without speaking for 2 weeks. By nightfall on the first day, the candle began to flicker and then went out. The first monk said, "Oh, no. The candle is out." The second monk said, "Aren't we not supposed to talk?" The third monk said, "Why must you two break the silence?" The fourth monk laughed and said, "Ha! I'm the only one who didn't speak." The Buddhist nun called Ryanen was born in the year 1779. The famous Japanese warrior Shinjin was her grandfather. She was considered one of the loveliest women in the whole of Japan and a poetess of no mean talent, so already at the age of 17 she was chosen to serve at the royal court, where she developed a great fondness for her imperial majesty the empress. Now the empress died a sudden death and Ryanen underwent a profound spiritual experience. She became acutely aware of the passing nature of all things. That was when she made up her mind to study Zen. But her family wouldn't hear of it. They practically forced her into marriage, but not before she had extracted from the man from her future husband the promise that after she had borne him 3 children she would be free to become a nun. This condition was fulfilled when she was 25. Then neither the pleas of her husband nor anything else in the world could dissuade her from the task she had set her heart on. She shaved her head, took the name of Ryanen, which means to understand clearly, and set out on her quest. She came to the city of Ito and asked the master Tetsujau to accept her as his disciple. He took one look at her and rejected her because she was too beautiful. So she went to another master, Hakuo. He rejected her for the same reason. Her beauty, he said, would only be a source of trouble. So Ryanen branded her face with a red-hot iron, thereby destroying her physical beauty forever. When she came back into Hakuo's presence, he accepted her as a disciple. Ryanen wrote a poem on the reverse side of a little mirror to commemorate the occasion. As a handmaid of my empress I burned incense to give fragrance to my lovely clothes. Now as a homeless beggar I burn my face to enter the world of Zen. When she knew her time had come to depart this world, she wrote another poem. 66 times have these eyes beheld the loveliness of autumn. Ask no more. Only listen to the sound of the pines when no wind stirs. A Zen monk named Ichi labored his whole life in the kitchen of the great monastery at Lake Hakone. He deemed himself a failed monk because he had been assigned the koan of what is the sound of one hand clapping since his earliest days in the congregation and had never been able to solve it. It was now 55 years of seeming failure, and he was nearing the end of his lifetime. But as he lay dying he suddenly realized that he cradled a great peace in his soul. Gone was the striving for enlightenment, gone was the stridency of his loins, and gone was the haunting koan, for he had found the stillness of no longer striving in this exquisite silence alone in the attic in the soft dark at the end of his life. It was only then, when there remained no more questions nor need for answers, or even the need for breathing, that Ichi heard at last the whooshing silence of one hand clapping. Once upon a time, twins were conceived. Weeks passed and the twins developed. As their awareness grew, they laughed for joy. Isn't it great that we were conceived? Isn't it great to be alive together? The twins explored their worlds. When they found their mother's cord that gave them life, they sang for joy. How great our mother's love is. that she shares her own life with us as weeks stretched into months. The twins noticed how much each was changing. "What does it mean?" one asked. "It means our stay in this world is drawing to an end," said the other. "But I don't want to go," said one. "I want to stay here always." "We have no choice," said the other. "But maybe there is life after birth." "But how can there be? We will shed our life cord, and how can life be possible without it? Besides, we have seen evidence that others were here before us, and none of them has returned to tell us there is life after birth. No, this is the end. Maybe there is no mother after all, but there has to be," protested the other. "How else did we get here? How do we remain alive? Have you ever seen our mother?" said one. "Maybe she only lives in our minds. Maybe we made her up because the idea made us feel good." So the last days in the womb were filled with deep questioning and fear. Finally, the moment of birth arrived. When the twins had passed from their world, they opened their eyes and cried for joy, for what they saw exceeded their fondest dreams. One day a young Buddhist on his journey home came to the banks of a wide river. Staring hopelessly at the great obstacle in front of him, he pondered for hours on just how to cross such a wide barrier. Just as he was about to give up his pursuit to continue his journey, he saw a great teacher on the other side of the river. The young Buddhist yells over to the teacher, "Oh wise one, can you tell me how to get to the other side of this river?" The teacher ponders for a moment, looks up and down the river and yells back, "My son, you're on the other side." One day God took the form of a human male, in order to walk through the world and see how her children were faring. He soon came upon an old ascetic who had spent his entire adult life in severe bodily mortification and forceful mental disciplines. The ascetic had gained a certain degree of clarity of his senses from his prolonged practice and realized that the man casually walking by his cave was fully established in awareness of the inner divine self. Painfully unwinding his body from his rigid posture, the ascetic bowed before God and said, "Great-souled one, I perceive you are an illumined master. Pray tell me, honorable sir, how long it will take me before I realize my inner divine nature?" God smiled warmly and laughingly replied, "You are doing well. At your present rate of progress, you will realize your inner divine self with just one more lifetime of similar effort." The ascetic, terrified, in shock, cried, "Another lifetime of this horror? How can I endure this boredom, this agony, this pain for another day, let alone another lifetime? How horrible! You have cursed me this day. Begone from this place, you impostor. Never would I believe such as you." God smiled lovingly at him and walked on, soon coming upon an idiot splashing in the river, laughing and singing. This woman's primary activity every day was to cry out, "God, how I love God! God, I love God! God, this foolish one!" Never took the slightest care for her physical needs, never cared if she were fed, clothed, housed. She never noticed if she were clean or dirty, hot or cold, wet or dry. She might have been locked up in a padded cell in our modern age, but in those days, people saw that she was harmless and therefore tolerated her and occasionally gave her a crust of bread or some old, half-rotten fruits or vegetables to eat. This idiot was attracted by the radiance of this handsome stranger, came up out of the water, bowed before him and said, "How wonderful! God has sent by a great-souled one. I have been enjoying myself so much of late I had nearly forgotten I have a goal. I began my quest to realize enlightenment long ago, but of late have become distracted by this constant joy welling up inside. Seeing you just now reminded me of my journey, and I was wondering if you could tell me how long it will be before I realize my inner divine nature." God smiled warmly and laughingly replied, "You are doing well. At your present rate of progress, you will realize your inner divine self with just 70 more lifetimes of similar effort." 70 lifetimes of similar effort, cried the idiot with perfect joy. "How wonderful! What a flawless boon you have today bestowed upon me." The idiot was so filled with joy at the prospect of another 70 lifetimes of such bliss that the last doubt fled from her mind. Her last question melted into the joy that was her life. Her ignorance was Irrevocably crushed, she attained the highest state of enlightenment instantly. Mind Studies was a lay self-improvement influenced by Zen. One day a follower of Mind Studies came to Zen Master Shozen to ask about the essentials of Buddhism. The Zen Master said, "Buddhism is not a matter of using your discursive intellect to govern your body. It is a matter of using the moment of the immediate present purely, not wasting it without thinking about past or future. This is why the ancients exhorted people first of all to be careful of time. This means guarding the mind strictly, sweeping away all things, whether good or bad, and detaching from the ego." Furthermore, Zen Master continued, "For the reformation of mind it is good to observe the principle of cause and effect. For example, even if others hate us, we should not resent them, we should criticize ourselves. Thinking why people should hate us for no reason, assuming that there must be a causal factor in us, and even that there must be other as yet unknown casual factors in us. Maintaining that all things are effects of causes, we should not make judgments based on subjective ideas. On the whole, things do not happen in accord with subjective ideas, they happen in accord with the laws of nature. If you maintain awareness of this, your mind will become very clear." Some friends of mine had arranged for an encounter between two prominent visiting Buddhist teachers at the house of a Harvard University psychology professor. These were teachers from two distinctly different Buddhist traditions who had never met and whose traditions had in fact had very little contact over the past 1,000 years. Before the worlds of Buddhism and Western psychology could come together, the various strands of Buddhism would have to encounter one another. We were to witness the first such dialogue. The teachers, 70-year-old Kalu Rinpoche of Tibet, a veteran of years of solitary retreat, and the Zen master, Seung San, the first Korean Zen master to teach in the United States, were to test each other's understanding of the Buddha's teachings for the benefit of the onlooking Western students. This was to be a high form of what was and meditation, and we were waiting with all the anticipation that such a historic encounter deserved. The two monks entered with swirling robes maroon and yellow for the Tibetan, austere grey and black or the Korean, and were followed by retinues of younger monks and translators with shaven heads. They settled onto cushions in the familiar cross-legged positions, and the host made it clear that the younger Zen master was to begin. The Tibetan Lama sat very still, fingering a wooden rosary, mala, with one hand, while murmuring, Om Mani Padme Hum, continuously under his breath. The Zen master, who they were forced to admit their ignorance and in bellowing, "Keep that, don't know," minded them, reached deep inside his robes and drew out an orange. "What is this?" he demanded of the Lama. "What is this?" This was a typical opening question, and we could feel him ready to pounce on whatever response he was given. The Tibetan sat quietly, fingering his mala, and made no move to respond. "What is this?" the Zen master insisted, holding the orange up to the Tibetan's nose. Kalu Rinpoche bent very slowly to the Tibetan monk near to him who was serving as the translator, and they whispered back and forth for several minutes. Finally the translator addressed the room. "Rinpoche says, what is the matter with him? Don't they have oranges where he comes from?" The dialogue progressed no further. A man traveling across a field encountered a tiger. He fled, the tiger after him. Coming to a precipice, he caught hold of the root of a wild tree and swung himself down over the edge. The tiger sniffed at him from above. Trembling, the man looked down to where, far below, another tiger was waiting to eat him. Only the tree sustained him. Two mice, one white and one black, little by little started to gnaw away the tree. The man saw a luscious strawberry near him. Grasping the tree with one hand, he plucked the strawberry with the other. How sweet it tasted! A great festival was to be held in a village, and each villager was asked to contribute by pouring a bottle of wine into a giant barrel. One of the villagers had this thought: if I pour a bottle of water in the giant barrel, no one will notice the difference. But it didn't occur to him that everyone else in the village might have the same thought. When the banquet began and the barrel was tapped, what came out was pure water. An old man says he complained only once in all his life, when his feet were bare and he had no money to buy shoes. Then he saw a happy man who had no feet, and he never complained again. Satan once wrote a set of guidelines for Zen monasteries, and ancients said that Zen study requires 3 essentials. 1 is a great root of faith. The 2nd is a great feeling of wonder. The 3rd is great determination. If one of these is lacking, you are like a tripod missing a leg. Here I have no special stipulations. I only require that you clearly recognize that everyone has an essential nature that can be perceived, and that there is an essential truth that everyone can penetrate. Only then will your determination continue. And there are sayings at which to wonder. If people go off half aware and half awakened, they cannot really succeed in Zen. It is imperative to be careful and thoroughgoing. A wise Zen frog was explaining to the younger frogs the balance of nature. Do you see how that fly eats a gnat? And now, with a bite, I eat the fly. It is all part of the great scheme of things. Isn't it bad to kill in order to live? Asked the thoughtful frog. It depends, answered the wise frog, just as a snake swallowed the Zen frog in one chomp before the frog finished his sentence. Depends on what, shouted the students. Depends on whether you're looking at things from the inside or outside, came the muffled response from inside the snake. Hi guys, if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe our channel, give it a thumbs up, and share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe now.